"Dad, this design is wrong." The words landed just as Ethan Walker bent to gather the interview folder that had slipped from his hands onto the polished floor of the startup's prototype gallery. His 8-year-old daughter, Lily, stood beside the glass case, one finger lifted toward the $40 million model inside, her other arm hugging a worn sketchbook open to a page of safety symbols. Victor Hayes stepped in front of the case too quickly. "That's sweet," he said, smiling without warmth. "But this isn't a classroom." Claire Bennett stopped mid-stride. The room did too. 3 hours earlier, Ethan had parked his aging blue pickup 2 blocks away because the visitor lot required a badge he did not have yet. The July heat had already begun rising off the pavement in pale waves, and Lily walked beside him in a yellow cardigan, carrying the same sketchbook against her chest like it held something breakable. Ethan wore his old navy work jacket despite the weather. The cuffs were frayed, the zipper stuck halfway up, and in the inside pocket sat a mechanical pencil he had owned since before Lily was born. "Remember," he said quietly as they approached the glass doors. "Inside voices, polite hands, and if grown-ups are busy, we wait." Lily nodded. "Even if I see something wrong?" Ethan paused with his hand on the door handle. For a second, the reflection in the glass showed him not as an engineer, not as a father trying to restart a life, but as a tired man holding one good folder and one small hand. "If it can hurt someone," he said, "you tell the truth kindly." The lobby of Bennett Dynamics smelled like new carpet, lemon cleaner, and expensive coffee. Above them, white light ran in clean strips across the ceiling, bright enough to make every fingerprint on the glass walls visible. Young engineers moved past with tablets tucked under their arms. No one was rude at first. That made it worse somehow. They looked through Ethan the way people look through delivery men, janitors, men in old jackets carrying resumes printed at the public library. At the reception desk, Lily stood on her toes to see the badge printer. Ethan gently touched her shoulder, guiding her back. "Thank you for seeing me," he told the recruiter when she arrived. His voice was low, steady, practiced by years of not letting disappointment spill onto his child. The interview itself lasted less than 20 minutes. Through the glass wall, Lily sat outside with a paper cup of water and drew small squares, arrows, and warning triangles the way Ethan had taught her at the kitchen table. Inside, Ethan answered every question about load tolerances, latch fatigue, and fail-safe design with calm precision. But the recruiter's smile grew thinner when Victor Hayes entered late, silver badge swinging from his neck, carrying Ethan's file like it already weighed nothing. "Your background is interesting," Victor said, "but our launch environment moves fast. We need current certifications, current tools, current thinking." Ethan nodded once. He did not argue. By the time he stepped back into the hallway, the folder had a small printed label on top. "Rejected, outdated certification." Beneath it, almost hidden in smaller type, were the words "strong mechanical safety background." Lily saw the first word before he could cover it. She said nothing, only slipped her hand into his. Then, on their way out, they passed the prototype gallery, where the model gleamed behind glass like a promise no poor man was supposed to question. Lily slowed. Her sketchbook opened. Her brow tightened. And on the white metal housing of the prototype, beside a tiny red arrow, the safety lock symbol was turned the wrong way. The safety lock symbol sat there in the glass reflection, tiny and red, turned just enough for Lily's small finger to hover in the air too long. Ethan felt the room notice before anyone spoke. The soft scuff of shoes stopping, the faint hum of the display lights, the clean smell of polished acrylic and coffee cooling on a nearby table. Victor Hayes lowered his hand gently over the space between Lily and the case, not touching her, but closing the world in front of her. "Let's give the engineers room, sweetheart." Lily pulled her hand back. Ethan placed one palm on her shoulder. Claire Bennett stood 10 feet away, her tablet still awake in her hand. "Is there a problem?" "No problem," Victor said. "Just a child being curious." She saw the symbol. Children see shapes. Ethan looked down at Lily, then at the sketchbook pressed against her sweater. The page had bent at one corner, the pencil drawings smudged from her thumb. He could feel her breathing faster beneath his hand. Not scared exactly, but embarrassed in that quiet way children get when adults make them feel too small for the room they are standing in. She didn't mean to interrupt, Ethan said. We were leaving. Victor smiled as if forgiveness were something he owned. Of course, and we appreciate the enthusiasm. But this is a controlled area, Mr. Walker. Prototype information is confidential. I'm sure you understand. The word confidential landed with a soft accusation. A young engineer near the display lowered his eyes to Ethan's boots, then to the worn seam of his jacket. Another whispered something behind a paper coffee cup. It was not loud enough to challenge, but it was loud enough to wound. Ethan heard the familiar shape of it anyway. Old jacket, old credentials, old man trying to matter in a new building. The recruiter came up beside them holding Ethan's folder flat against her chest. The white rejection label faced outward. Rejected, outdated certification. Under it, almost swallowed by the glare, the smaller note still read strong mechanical safety background. Claire's eyes flicked to that line, then away before anyone could call it interest. Mr. Walker, the recruiter said carefully, we really do thank you for coming in. Yes, Victor added, and for bringing such a bright little girl. But today's review process is complete. Lily lifted her sketchbook just an inch. But my dad said red arrows mean. Lily, Ethan whispered, not sharp, not ashamed. Just enough to protect her from becoming the center of their kindness-shaped dismissal. He crouched in front of her and gently closed the sketchbook, smoothing the bent corner with his thumb. We don't answer disrespect by becoming disrespectful. Lily swallowed and nodded, though her eyes stayed wet and fixed on the glass case. Victor's smile tightened for half a second. Claire saw it. She also saw Ethan rise without anger, take the folder from the recruiter, and tuck it beneath his arm as if it were not a verdict but only paper. Thank you for your time, he said. His voice did not crack. That, more than protest, changed the air around him. The lobby seemed too bright now, every chrome edge and glass wall reflecting the same quiet humiliation from different angles. Ethan guided Lily toward the exit, keeping his body between her and the watching engineers. Behind them, Victor turned to the display team. Let's reset the gallery before the investor walkthrough, and someone archive that candidate file properly. The sentence was smooth, professional, ordinary. But Claire looked down at Ethan's folder again before the recruiter took it away, and for the first time she seemed to notice that Victor had not asked what Lily saw. He had only tried to make sure no one else did. Claire did not stop Ethan at the door. Not yet. She only watched him pass through the last band of white lobby light with Lily's hand tucked safely inside his, the rejected folder pressed against his ribs, and his jaw set with the kind of restraint that looked almost invisible until a person knew how to look. Behind him, Victor's polished voice moved on to launch timing, investor flow, and gallery reset, as if dignity were something that could be swept off the floor between meetings. Then, near the service corridor, a gray plastic cart struck the metal threshold with a hard crack, and a stack of testing binders spilled across the tile. Mason Reed, the young test engineer, cursed under his breath and dropped to one knee, chasing loose pages before the air vent could scatter them. Ethan stopped. Lily looked up at him. For one small second, the world offered Ethan the cleanest exit of his life. Leave, take the hurt with him, let the bright building handle its own mess. Instead, he set his folder down against the wall and knelt beside Mason. You'll lose the sequence if the pages turn, he said softly, gathering the sheets by their numbered corners. Start from the blue tabs. Mason blinked, surprised that the man everyone had just dismissed knew how test documents were ordered. You don't have to. I know. Ethan said it without bitterness. He handed over a binder clip, then used the heel of his palm to flatten a creased cover sheet. The hallway smelled faintly of warm copier toner and machine oil, a scent that tugged at some old part of him. The garage he had worked in after losing his design job, the kitchen table where Lily had colored beside unpaid bills, the quiet promise he had made after his wife's funeral that their daughter would never learn cruelty from his mouth. Lily crouched too, carefully picking up a metal ruler that had slid under the cart. Daddy, this one has the same little arrow, she whispered. Ethan glanced only long enough to see the service log in her hand. The page was stamped prototype latch assembly, and halfway down, beneath a line that read latch orientation verified, the signature box sat empty. His fingers paused for less than a breath. Then he turned the paper face down and gave it back to Mason. "That belongs to him, sweetheart. We don't read what isn't ours." Lily nodded and held the ruler out with both hands. Mason took it slowly, his eyes moving from the face-down service log to the closed sketchbook under Lily's arm. Down the hall, Victor looked over and gave a faint chuckle to the recruiter. "Some people can't help trying to be useful." It sounded harmless, almost kind. But Claire, standing near the glass wall, heard the shape underneath it. Ethan did not answer. He simply noticed the cart wheel jammed crooked under its bracket, took the mechanical pencil from his jacket pocket, and used the metal clip to nudge the axle back into place. The wheel straightened with a small pop. "Should roll now," he said. Mason pushed the cart an inch. It moved cleanly. No applause followed. No offer came. Ethan wiped a smudge of black grease from his thumb onto a folded tissue, picked up his rejected folder, and guided Lily toward the exit again. But Mason remained kneeling on the tile, staring at the unsigned service log Ethan had refused to read. And for the first time that morning, the mistake no one wanted to see was lying in the hands of someone who could. Mason did not call after Ethan right away. He stood in the service corridor with one hand on the cart handle and the unsigned service log resting against the binder stack, feeling the small wrongness of it grow heavier the longer he looked. Latch orientation verified. No signature. The words were ordinary until they weren't. Behind him, Victor's voice cut through the hall with practiced ease. "Mason, we're 10 minutes from investor prep. Why is that cart still here?" Mason straightened. "I need to check one thing. Now? It'll take 2 minutes. Then take one." The kindness in Victor's tone was almost perfect, but his shoes had already shifted toward the binder, closing the space between Mason and the page. Ethan had reached the front doors when Claire's assistant came quickly across the lobby, breathless but careful. "Mr. Walker? Ms. Bennett would like to ask a brief follow-up." Ethan looked down at Lily first, not at the glass walls, not at the watching employees. "Are you okay going back for a minute?" Lily nodded, though her fingers tightened around the spine of her sketchbook. When they returned, the prototype gallery felt different. The lights were the same, the glass was the same, the $40 million model still sat in its white-lit case like a church relic for investors. But Mason had opened the service log beside a printed change request, and Claire stood over both documents with her arms folded. She did not look pleased. She looked responsible. Victor smiled when Ethan entered, that same smooth expression placed carefully over irritation. "I'm sorry for the confusion," he said. "There's no issue here. We had a revised latch orientation approved by the partner team." Claire tapped the paper. "Where's Appendix B?" The question was quiet. Victor blinked once. "It's in the digital packet. This says attached. Administrative formatting." Ethan stood a few feet away, hands visible, shoulders relaxed. He did not reach for the documents. He only looked where Claire was looking. The change request had a fresh staple mark in the corner, the paper still slightly curled from a warm printer. Under the revision line, the words orientation adjustment appeared, but the section explaining the safety rationale ended halfway down the page, as if a door had been closed before the room behind it could be seen. Lily leaned against Ethan's side and whispered, "Daddy, that page looks like the one Mason dropped." Ethan touched her shoulder gently. "Quiet voice, sweetheart." Victor heard enough. Again, this is why controlled information should stay with staff. Ethan lifted his eyes then, calm but no longer absent. If a child can mistake a public-facing symbol for a safety sign, maybe the question isn't whether she should have seen it. Maybe the question is whether the symbol is doing its job. No one answered immediately. The air conditioner clicked on above them, blowing a cold line of air across the glass. Claire's gaze moved from the missing Appendix B to Victor's hand, which had settled flat over the lower corner of the service log, where the empty signature box waited. She still did not trust Ethan. Not fully. A rejected candidate had every reason to be wounded, and the surface story still belonged to Victor. Revision, partner approval, administrative formatting. But Ethan had not asked for revenge. He had asked for a check. Lock document editing, Claire said at last. Victor turned. Claire, that's unnecessary. For 30 minutes. We have investors upstairs. Then we'll be accurate downstairs. Mason exhaled so softly it barely moved the page. Ethan looked toward the exit, ready to leave if dismissed again. But his eyes paused on the missing appendix line. In that blank space where a safety reason should have been, there was only a clean white gap pretending to be procedure. The blank space on the change request seemed to make the whole gallery quieter, as if the missing Appendix B had taken the air with it. Claire Bennett kept her eyes on the page for another second, then looked toward Mason. Run the low-speed latch check. Victor's smile stayed in place, but the muscles along his jaw shifted. Claire, the unit is staged for investors. We don't run unnecessary motion tests in a clean gallery. Then we'll run a necessary one. Mason moved first, pulling a slim control tablet from the test cart. Ethan took one step back from the prototype case and lifted both hands slightly, palms open, making it clear he would not touch the model, would not make himself the excuse Victor needed. Lily stood close to his leg, her sketchbook pressed tight against her chest, and Ethan bent just enough to whisper, "You did nothing wrong. Now we let the adults check carefully." That small sentence steadied her more than any apology from the room could have. Victor turned to the watching engineers with a soft laugh. "Everyone, please remember this is a preliminary assembly. Prototype noise and tolerance drift are normal." A few people nodded because it was easier than doubting the man in charge. Mason unlocked the test interface. The prototype's internal motor woke with a faint electric hum beneath the glass. The white housing shifted 1/4 inch, then the latch arm slid forward. For a moment, everything looked smooth. Then came the sound. Click. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a small, dry catch buried under the motor noise, the kind of sound most people would forget as soon as they heard it. But Ethan's eyes closed. His shoulders tightened once, barely enough to see. Claire noticed. "Mr. Walker?" Ethan opened his eyes. "Could you run that again with the same load setting?" Victor stepped in before Mason could answer. "That won't be necessary. He's reacting to normal bench chatter." Ethan did not look at Victor. He looked at Mason. Same speed, same force. Don't change anything else. The simplicity of the request slowed the room. Mason looked to Claire. Claire nodded. The second test began. The motor hummed. The latch arm slid. Again, the half-second hesitation. Again, the wrong click. This time, even the people by the coffee table heard it. One engineer who had been whispering stopped with his mouth still half open. The air conditioner above the gallery became suddenly louder. Claire placed her tablet flat against the table, screen down. "Save that recording." Victor gave a careful sigh. "I don't want people misreading a sound. This is exactly how panic starts before a launch." "Panic starts," Ethan said quietly, "when people hear warning and call it noise." No one laughed. Mason replayed the 90-second test clip, and on the small screen the timestamp rolled clean. Across the bottom. The delay was visible now if a person knew where to look. The latch entered, resisted, then seated late. Not enough to break. Not enough to end the story. Enough to prove that Lily had not imagined the symbol, and Ethan had not invented the concern because he was hurt. Claire's thumb moved once across her phone. A message went out to someone Ethan could not see. "Archive the clip to the independent drive," she told Mason, "and do not overwrite any test data from this unit." Victor's eyes flicked to her phone, then to the camera tucked high in the gallery corner, its black dome reflecting a distorted image of all of them standing around the glass. His smile returned, but thinner. "I can handle the review personally." Claire did not answer him. Ethan lowered himself beside Lily and gently opened her sketchbook to the safety symbol page. Not for the room, but for her. "You remembered what the arrow meant," he said. "That was enough." Lily's breathing eased. Mason, still pale, pulled the service log from under the binder clip and scanned down the page with a shaking finger. There was no note about a click, no note about a delay, no signature beside latch orientation verified. And when he opened the test history on the tablet, the most recent full-speed run had not been signed by him at all. The unsigned full-speed run sat on Mason's tablet like a quiet accusation. His thumb hovered over the entry, then tapped once, and the audit details opened under the cold gallery lights. The test had been approved the night before at 11:43 p.m. under Mason Reed's credentials, even though Mason's face had gone pale enough to answer before his mouth did. "I was home with a fever," he said. "I didn't sign that." Victor gave a soft, professional laugh. "Remote approvals happen all the time. Let's not turn a login issue into a conspiracy." But Claire did not laugh with him. She took the tablet, held it where the light did not glare, and read the timestamp again. 11:43 p.m. Then she looked up toward the black dome camera above the gallery entrance. "Pull lab access from last night. CAD logs too." Victor's smile thinned. "Claire, with investors upstairs, this should be handled offline." "It will be handled accurately." The IT technician arrived with a laptop still warm from its docking station. The printer behind the reception desk stopped mid-cycle, leaving the hall in a strange half-silence. Paper caught between rollers like even the building was holding its breath. Ethan stood beside Lily, one hand resting lightly on the closed sketchbook. He could feel anger rising in him now. Not loud, not wild, but old. He thought of every unpaid bill folded beside job applications, every polite rejection. Every night he had told Lily that honest work still mattered even when the world seemed to reward shortcuts. For a moment, he wanted to point at Victor and say the thing everyone was beginning to see. Instead, he looked at Mason. "Make copies before conclusions," Ethan said. "Truth deserves a clean chain." Claire heard that. So did Victor. The lab footage loaded in grainy gray-blue. At 11:42 p.m., Victor Hayes entered the prototype room alone, badge in hand, shoulders hunched against the dark. He stood beside the latch assembly for 4 minutes, blocking part of the workbench from the camera with his body. Then the CAD log appeared. Revision uploaded. Orientation adjustment. Approved by Mason Reed. 1 minute later, the room did not explode. Compressed. Someone set down a coffee cup too carefully. Lily slid closer to Ethan's side. "Daddy," she whispered. "That's the man from the glass." Ethan nodded once. "I know." Victor cleared his throat. "I inspected the unit personally after Mason missed a verification. That's leadership, not misconduct." Claire's eyes moved to the next line of metadata, and her face changed. Not with pity, not with belief, but with recognition that the ground under her company had shifted. "What is EW LatchSafe 2018? She asked. The name hung there, plain black text on a white screen. Ethan did not answer right away. His gaze dropped to his mechanical pencil, still smudged with grease from fixing Mason's cartwheel. "That was a naming structure I used," he said. "A latch safety concept. Years ago." Victor turned too quickly. "Common abbreviation. Could stand for anything. It came from my kitchen table," Ethan said, his voice low. "After my wife died, I worked nights designing fail-safe locks because I needed Lily to grow up believing machines should protect people, not gamble with them." No one spoke. Claire looked from Ethan to the screen, then back to Victor, and for the first time she did not see a rejected candidate standing in her gallery. She saw an original designer whose work might have been buried inside her flagship product without his name. Victor slipped his phone into his pocket as if hiding the glow of a message, then stepped closer to Claire. "We should discuss this privately." Claire closed the laptop halfway, not to end the matter, but to protect what had just been found. "No," she said. "We discuss it with the board, with IT present, with Mason present, and with Mr. Walker present." The glass doors of the executive conference room opened down the hall, and the truth, once small enough to fit inside a child's sketchbook, had become too heavy for any closed office to hold. The executive conference room had glass walls on 3 sides, which made privacy feel more like a performance than a promise. Beyond the glass, The prototype gallery still glowed white and spotless. The same place where Ethan Walker had bent to pick up a rejected folder and Lily had been told, gently, to be quiet. Now the board members gathered around the long table with investor packets still stacked at one end, untouched coffee cooling in paper cups, and the $40 million prototype visible behind them like a witness that could not leave. Ethan entered last, not as a man expecting victory, but as a father holding his daughter's hand with the careful steadiness of someone who knew rooms like this could still turn cruel. Lily stayed close beside him, her sketchbook pressed flat against her chest. Claire Bennett stood at the head of the table, but she did not speak first. She let the room see the order of things. Mason Reed with the service log, IT with the laptop, Victor Hayes in his tailored jacket, and Ethan in the old Navy work coat they had dismissed less than an hour before. Victor placed both hands on the table and gave the board a calm, wounded smile. Before this goes any further, I want to say I understand how this looks. But what we have here is a rushed misunderstanding amplified by an unsuccessful candidate and a child who saw a symbol out of context. A few faces softened, not because they believed him fully, but because his explanation gave them somewhere comfortable to stand. Victor continued, smoother now. I made a late inspection because Mason missed a step. I used his approval flow to keep the launch on schedule. Was it imperfect? Yes. Was it malicious? Absolutely not. For one dangerous moment, the room leaned toward him. Procedure sounded safer than theft. Urgency sounded cleaner than deceit. Ethan lowered his eyes to Lily and gently took the sketchbook from her hands. He did not open it dramatically. He laid it on the table closed, like something fragile being returned to its rightful place. My daughter isn't here to prove a case, he said quietly. She saw what I taught her to notice. The rest is in your documents. Claire looked at him for one still second, then nodded to Mason. Mason slid the service log forward first. This is the verification sheet found with the testing binders. The line reads latch orientation verified, but the signature box is blank. Victor exhaled. A clerical delay. Mason's hand trembled, but his voice held. Then the 90-second test clip. The video played on the wall screen, enlarged now. The latch arm slid, hesitated, clicked wrong, and seated late. The sound was small through the conference speakers, but in that room it landed like a stone in a glass bowl. Victor folded his arms. Prototype noise. I already explained that. Claire did not argue. She tapped the table once. Camera. IT brought up the lab footage. Victor appeared in blue-gray security light at 11:42 p.m., entering alone, standing beside the latch assembly, blocking the bench with his body. Victor straightened. As I said, I inspected it personally. Leadership sometimes means stepping in. Again, the explanation almost worked. Almost. Then Ethan spoke, barely louder than the air system humming above them. If you were only inspecting, why was the revision approved under Mason's credentials 1 minute later? No one moved. Victor's eyes shifted, just once, toward the laptop. Claire saw it. So did 2 board members. IT opened the CAD log and placed the next image on the screen. Revision uploaded, orientation adjustment, approved by Mason Reed, 11:43 p.m. Beneath it sat the metadata line, EW LatchSafe 2018. Victor laughed softly, but this time the sound had edges. Common code. It could mean anything. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and placed his mechanical pencil beside Lily's sketchbook. The pencil had grease on the clip from fixing Mason's cartwheel. It means Ethan Walker, he said. It means a latch concept I built at my kitchen table after my wife died. Not to win an argument, to keep failure from becoming injury. The room did not soften. It sharpened. Claire opened a slim folder the recruiter had scanned earlier and turned it toward the board. Ethan's rejected application. The label still printed across the top, rejected, outdated certification. Below it, in small type, strong mechanical safety background. Victor's mouth tightened. This is exactly my concern. He has motive to reinterpret internal data. Ethan looked at him then, not angry, only tired of watching truth pushed under polished language. This isn't about revenge, he said. It's about not burying warning signs until someone gets hurt. Claire finally lifted her phone from beside the folder. IT, she said. Open the 2019 applicant archive and audit trail. Victor's face changed so quickly most people might have missed it. But Lily, standing behind her father's arm, saw him reach for the edge of the table as if the floor had shifted. On the wall screen, a loading bar appeared, and the last sealed door between the room and the truth began to open. The 2019 applicant archive opened on the wall screen, and the first file name made Victor Hayes stop breathing through his smile. Ethan_Walker_latch_safe_submission.pdf. Beneath it sat the audit trail, downloaded by V. Hayes, June 14, 2019, 10:18 p.m. A second line appeared below it, colder than the first, copied into internal prototype folder, renamed ApexLock_Rev1. No one spoke. Even the projector fans seemed too loud now, pushing warm air into a room that had gone still as stone. Victor reached for a glass of water, but his fingers touched the rim and missed. The glass trembled once against the table. Claire Bennett did not look away from the screen. Continue, she said. IT clicked again, and the slow-motion test filled the wall. The latch arm sliding forward, the wrong-facing safety symbol flashing under the gallery light, the half-second hesitation stretching into something unbearable. Frame by frame, the mechanism seated late. Then, under simulated load, it kicked back. Not violently enough to shatter the model. Not theatrically enough to impress a crowd. Just enough for every engineer in the room to understand what would happen during a live demonstration, in front of investors beside human hands and cameras and trust. Mason covered his mouth. One board member pushed back from the table, the chair legs whispering against the floor. Lily's hand found Ethan's. He closed his fingers around hers without looking down, because if he did, the ache in his chest might become too much. This was what she had seen as a child. Not the lawsuit, not the theft, not the audit trail, not the buried design. Just an arrow turned the wrong way. Just a warning her father had taught her not to ignore. Victor tried once more. That file was part of a public applicant pool. Concepts overlap. The orientation change was a team decision. His voice was dry now, smaller. Claire turned from the screen and faced him fully. Then show the team record. Victor's eyes moved to the table, to the camera reflection in the glass, to the laptop he no longer controlled. No team record appeared. No Appendix B. No signed verification. No clean explanation. Only the service log, the video, the camera footage, the metadata, the 2019 archive, and a child's sketchbook lying closed beside a grease-smudged mechanical pencil. Claire removed the launch badge from around her neck. The plastic card tapped the conference table once. Cancel the launch. The words did not echo. They absorbed everything. The investor packets, the polished glass, the soft arrogance, the morning's laughter, the label on Ethan's file that said outdated. All of it seemed to lose its weight at once. Victor stared at her. Claire, you can't. I can, she said. And I should have sooner. She turned to the board. Victor Hayes is suspended pending independent investigation. Legal receives the audit trail today. Engineering freezes the prototype until a full safety redesign is complete. Mason's credentials are locked and reviewed. No one deletes a file. No one edits a log. No one blames a child for noticing what adults rushed past. That was when the room went silent in the deepest way. Not because they had nothing to say, but because the truth had taken every easy sentence away from them. Ethan stood there in his old navy jacket, the rejected folder still under his arm, and did not smile. He only looked at the prototype behind the glass and said, "Fix it before anyone gets hurt." Claire's eyes softened, but her voice stayed steady. "Mr. Walker, will you stay long enough to help us understand the original safety intent?" Ethan looked down at Lily. She was holding her sketchbook against her heart now, her small shoulders finally lowering. The power in the room had turned toward him, but he did not reach for it like a prize. He breathed once, slow and careful, and the question left hanging in the bright conference room was not whether Ethan had been right, but what kind of man he would choose to be now that everyone knew it. The conference room emptied without applause. Board members carried their folders more carefully than they had carried their opinions an hour earlier. The investor packets disappeared into briefcases unopened. Through the glass wall, technicians rolled the prototype away under a bright yellow safety cover instead of a spotlight. The launch banners remained standing, but the excitement that had filled the building that morning had been replaced by something quieter, something far more valuable. Responsibility had finally entered the room. Victor Hayes left with Human Resources and Company Counsel, not in handcuffs, not humiliated before cameras, but surrounded by the ordinary weight of documented evidence. The audit trail, the archived application, the unsigned service log, the missing appendix, the security footage, and the 90-second test recording would continue their work long after voices faded. Ethan watched him go without satisfaction. There was no victory in seeing another life collapse. There was only relief that no family would have to pay for a preventable mistake. Claire Bennett remained behind until the last board member stepped into the hallway. She looked at the rejected application still tucked beneath Ethan's arm. Without saying a word, she removed the rejection cover sheet and folded it once. Underneath, the original evaluation remained, untouched by pride or panic. Strong mechanical safety background. She placed it gently on the table between them. This, she said quietly, should never have been buried under a certification checklist. Ethan looked at the paper for a long moment before answering. The certificate mattered, he said, but it should never have mattered more than whether people went home safely. Claire nodded slowly. You're right. She did not offer him a reward. She did not offer sympathy. She offered respect. I'd like you to help rebuild our safety review process. Ethan looked toward Lily first. She was sitting in one of the conference chairs, swinging her feet just enough for her shoes to miss the floor, her sketchbook resting peacefully in her lap. The same sketchbook that had been dismissed as a child's drawing now lay beside engineering reports and executive files without anyone asking for it to be removed. Ethan smiled at her before turning back to Claire. Only if every test engineer has the authority to stop a launch when they believe someone could get hurt. Claire answered without hesitation. Done. 3 weeks later, the prototype returned to the gallery. The latch had been redesigned. Independent verification required 2 separate signatures. Every revision automatically created an untouchable archive. No approval could be entered under another employee's credentials. The new policy carried no dramatic title. It simply became the way things were done. Ethan accepted the position of lead safety integrity engineer, but his office looked nothing like the executive suites upstairs. A mechanical pencil rested beside technical drawings. The old navy jacket still hung over the back of his chair. It had not become less worn. It had become a reminder that dignity had never depended on how new it looked. One afternoon, Claire stopped outside his office carrying a small frame. Inside was a photocopy of a single page from Lily's sketchbook, the page with the hand-drawn safety symbol pointing in the correct direction. Below it, a brass plaque read, "The right question can save lives, no matter who asks it." Ethan looked at Lily, who immediately shook her head with an embarrassed little smile. "I'm not an engineer," she whispered. Ethan knelt beside her chair. "No," he said softly. "You're exactly what I hoped you'd become." "What's that?" "Someone who tells the truth kindly when it might protect another person." Lily leaned against him, the sketchbook tucked safely beneath one arm. She no longer carried it because she needed adults to believe her. She carried it because it reminded her of evenings at the kitchen table, where lessons about arrows and warning signs had quietly become lessons about courage. As the afternoon sun stretched across the office floor, employees passed Ethan's doorway with easy nods instead of hurried glances. No one remembered the old rejection label anymore. They remembered the man who fixed a cart before defending himself, who protected his daughter before protecting his reputation, who chose evidence over anger and responsibility over revenge. Outside the glass windows, the redesigned prototype stood ready for a future built on honesty rather than speed. Inside the quiet office, the old mechanical pencil, the worn jacket, and a child's sketchbook rested side by side, no longer symbols of failure, but of promises kept. And in the end, the room that had once fallen silent because the truth arrived all at once became quiet for a different reason. Everyone finally understood that dignity never needs to raise its voice, and kindness is never truly lost. It simply waits for the moment when the truth can turn it into justice.